And so my mother, in particular, my grandmother, decided to send me and my brother away to Europe. That was a difficult journey. I did not envisage that this will be difficult, that it will take me over a year. I had to go through about 12,000 miles back and forth through 10 countries. We were separated from my brother by the smugglers. I used every type of transport that you can imagine, lorries, trains, cars, airplanes, horses, walking, boats, ferries. And I was asked to jump around moving train. And also being in the boat designed for 20 to 30 people. And there were 120 of us for 3 days and 3 nights almost. So there were occasions and times where I was, fit into small spaces. And I got across from Greece to Italy on top of a lorry engine, which is very, very hot and dangerous and risky. They didn't even ask for asylum, and they basically mistreated us really badly, put us in prison. And I was deported to Turkey, and then I was arrested in Turkey and spent 2 weeks in a prison in Istanbul, and they deported us all the way back to Iran, which was really, really frustrating. Yeah, and then I managed to escape from the Iranian police prison bus. It's just like, there were situations where, I don't know, not only being a 12 years old boy, but we were running for our lives. We were running for safety. And there were times where I wanted to give up, but then I had very little choice of what happens when I give up. And there were times where I kind of forgot about time. I just didn't want to know what day and week and month it was, because there was no point. Time becomes irrelevant because, there were days and nights we will spend in basements and places where it was very, in inhumane conditions.
Hey, this is your host Meenakshi Srivastava, also known as MyBohoVoyage, and I welcome you to another amazing episode of Inspiring Explorers. And as the name suggests, Inspiring Explorers is all about inspiring you with the inspiring life journeys of some of the most successful personalities from around the world, and they also share with us some interesting travel experiences that are not limited to sightseeing. This time on Inspiring Explorers, we have a bravest and strongest soul who had to leave his beloved motherland when he was just a 12-year-old kid and took on an uncertain, unknown journey to reach his destination. We have today with us the writer of the book, The Lightless Sky, Gulwali Passarlay. Gulwali was just 12 when he had to leave his dear homeland, Afghanistan, after the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 2006 and went on a dangerous and unknown journey to Europe all alone due to the unfortunate circumstances. At just 12 years of age, before he could reach Europe, Gulwali had to travel through about 8 to 10 countries, was sent to prison, deported, escaped prison, had his face burnt with chemicals, and almost died in the Mediterranean Sea. Today, Gulwali Passarlay is a best-selling author of the book The Lightless Sky, where he has talked about his journey to safety as a child refugee. He's also a public speaker, TEDx speaker, and refugee rights campaigner and activist, and a fan of Bollywood and South Indian movies. And before we start this episode, let me tell you that you can watch all my Inspiring Explorer episodes on my YouTube channel named MyBohoVoyage, spelled as MyBohoVoyage, or you can listen to them on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast. Just search for Inspiring Explorers on the apps and you'll find the show. Also, all the links are mentioned in the description box below. Also, come connect with me on Instagram at @MyBohoVoyage to catch me and my guests go live on Instagram. And if you're on Clubhouse, let's catch up for some good conversations. And without any further delay, let me welcome our amazing guest for today, the best-selling author of The Lightless Sky and a refugee rights activist, Gulwali Passarlay. So welcome to Inspiring Explorers, Gulwali. I'm super happy to have you here. It's an honor to have you on Inspiring Explorers.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you.
Okay, so, this interview is really important to me because this is the first time I'm talking to an Afghan, firstly. And then secondly, Afghanistan has been a part of India since history. And Afghanistan being our neighbor, and we share so much history together. Like I see Kandahar being a part of the Chandragupta Mauryan Empire. And yet there was a war in Afghanistan for years and we did not know about it. So could you let us know that how long has this war been going on in Afghanistan?
Sure. I mean, that would be a little controversial to say Afghanistan was part of India, but yes, we in historical, there has been, Empire Indians and Persian empires, and they kind of colluded in Afghanistan. So there's been literally in the middle. And so the situation in Afghanistan is such that not only in the last 20 years that we had insecurity and in this instability in this war, but actually the war has been happening for the last 45 years since the Soviet Union invaded in the 70s. And, I thought we have left this chapter of our history behind when the Taliban government collapsed in early 2000. And I thought we would move on, but sadly we are back to square one, and we are in a lot more dangerous place than we were 20 years ago. So yeah, it's very concerning.
Yeah, and it was a time in 2006 that you had to leave Afghanistan, which you have also mentioned in your book, The Lightless Sky. So, could you share us a little bit about, why did you have to leave? And I mean, it's heartbreaking for a mother to, let her child go, and that to at such a young age. So, what happened? Why did you have to leave?
So back in 2006, sadly, our lives were at risk and in danger. My family decided to send me and my brother to Europe for our own safety. We were in trouble with the American forces, the Afghan government, and the Taliban, because they had a very political family. Members of my uncle was a commander in the Taliban, so we had a very difficult situations where we had to manage. And sadly, I lost loved ones in the war as well, in the conflict. And so my mother, in particular, my grandmother, decided to send me and my brother away to Europe. That was a difficult journey. I did not, envisage that this will be difficult, that it will take me over a year. I had to go through about 12,000 miles back and forth through 10 countries. We were separated from my brother by the smugglers. It was a hellish journey. It was very challenging. I had to travel across, from Afghanistan to Pakistan, then Iran, Turkey, Bulgaria, and then I was arrested, imprisoned, deported back and forth, and I had to start all over again. And then, crossing the Mediterranean, which was very dangerous. And sadly, a lot of people are still doing it. There's been about 30,000 people losing their lives in the last 5 years in the Mediterranean, in the Aegean Sea, between Turkey and Greece, and between Libya and other countries in North Africa towards Italy. I go to Italy, and from there I continue the journey across France and to the UK. So it was a long journey. I wish I didn't have to go through it, but I came to the UK because supposedly my brother was here, but also I was unwelcomed in almost all the countries that I went through except Italy. So yeah, the refugee crisis, the people fleeing for their lives because of persecutions, injustices, and oppressions. And there are about almost over 5 million Afghan refugees, mostly in Iran and Pakistan, but also in Europe and also in the world. And right now, we used to have around 4 to 5 million internal displaced Afghans. But since the offenses of the Taliban began about a month ago, there has been over 1 million internal displaced in Kabul alone. So people move from district to cities, and then cities fall to the Taliban, and then they move from cities to the capital. And so Kabul still is actually dealing with around 1 million internally displaced people. And there's a humanitarian catastrophe, because the UN says about 18 million people who are in need of urgent assistance, like food and water and shelter before the conflict began. Now it's definitely more than 20 million people who are in need of basic necessity, and about 6 million, as I said, are internally displaced. So they need a lot more than the other 15 or so million people. So yeah, Afghanistan is in a very difficult situation and circumstances, and people are, we saw the images of the plane, the people in Kabul airport hanging onto planes and losing their lives, so desperate. And then we also saw, sadly, a suicide bombing at Kabul airport, which killed 200 or so people. And about 30 people lost their lives in the push and in the overcrowdedness, and there was stampede at the crowds. So yeah, these images have been keeping me awake.
Definitely. And I think a lot of world is shaken through it and they don't know what to do. So like before I start all the other questions, I would like to ask that what can the world do to help? And India also has refugees from Afghanistan, some being in Delhi. We have a mini Kabul in Delhi, so near Lajpat. And there are people devastated with the news of Kabul and the entire Afghanistan crisis. What can the world do to help the Afghanistani refugees?
So basically, the relationship between Afghanistan and India has been very close, neighborly, as well as we had a good, friendly relationship. There's a lot of Afghan businessmen in India. The Afghans usually visit India for medical treatments. And sadly, our relationship, I hope it will continue, but the government in Afghanistan might not be very friendly to India because of Pakistan and other political reasons. And it was good of India to accept Afghan refugees, but they were mainly minorities, mainly Sikhs and Hindu. And it breaks my heart on an Afghan. I think Afghanistan is not Afghanistan without its Sikh and Hindu population. We had a small number, and sadly a lot of them lost their lives, and many were forced to flee, not now, but in previous Taliban regime as well. What the world needs to do is not to forget Afghanistan. I want India and I want the rest of the world to stay connected to Afghanistan and Afghans, and not leave Afghans alone. I think the West has pulled a rug under our feet. The West has left us to the wolves. I mean, what has happened was preventable. It should not have happened. If America and the Western countries, NATO countries, have acted differently, it was not even inevitable that the Taliban will take over, but the Taliban were allowed to take over. And so Afghanistan was basically sold to the Taliban and Pakistan, basically. So it's very saddening to see what has happened and what is happening right now. People's dreams are shattered. People had hopes, particularly the young. These Afghans you see are leaving in their thousands. About 100,000 went to the US, or the US evacuated them, and about 15,000 came to the UK, and thousands went elsewhere in Australia and Europe. These Afghans are educated, skilled Afghans. They would not have been leaving if the situation was not like this, because they were there as journalists, as academics, civil society activists, and people who are doing things for the country. So yes, I want the world to keep an eye on Afghanistan. I want there to be accountability, and I want the media to not forget its focus, because at the moment, since the foreign troops left Kabul airport, the media attention has really reduced and decreased. Afghan journalists have been beaten, and a lot of Afghan journalists have actually fled the country. The main source of news we get is mainly from Pakistani journalists who are allowed to roam around freely in Afghanistan, unfortunately. And we just need international journalists to be on the ground, to observe what's happening and to report, because the Taliban are wary and aware of foreign journalists, and they will not do the same thing. They will not be as harsh to them as they are to Afghan journalists, because they know the international community will then make a stand. So yes, I want people to help in any way they can, especially when it comes to helping refugees in their host countries. I want them to support Afghan charities and organizations like the UNHCR in Afghanistan, UNICEF, and other Red Cross and other charities, local charities as well as international charity, working to support the needy Afghan people. So yeah, there are things we could all do. So we shouldn't feel hopeless and helpless and powerless, which we sometimes do, but there are things we could do. So Indians, if they could help, Afghans there arriving, the Afghan refugees there, but also to donate and support and volunteer with international organizations. If the media people could go and spend time in Afghanistan. So the Taliban have said they want to have good relationship with every country. So, and also I think India should not stop its diplomatic efforts in Afghanistan, should continue its diplomacy. And, even though we may not like the Taliban, but we should engage with them. I hope that will happen. Not only, just India, but all the countries in the region needs to work together for the sake of betterments of the Afghan people.
Definitely, being our neighboring country, Afghanistan needs our help, and I hope that people spread word about it and donate to the organizations and follow Gulwali on Instagram and all the other social media channels, because he has been having the entire links that are trustworthy, so that you can donate and help the Afghanistan refugees. And also you can buy the book, The Lightless Sky. The donations do go to the refugees of Afghanistan, this one, and it's an amazing book. It's not just about Afghanistan, the entire crisis, but also what the children and the refugees suffer from. So like Gulwali, you mentioned in the book that and also everywhere else in the interviews and so many places that I've read about you. So you were 13 when you reached Europe, by the time you could reach Europe, and you went through hell, the entire journey that you took. So when you reached, they denied your identity, that you're not 13 and you're a child, you're a 12-year-old going through hell, and you reach there and they deny your identity. So what happens to the refugees when they reach there, and how that can be improved?
So I think it's quite, devastating and insulting when people don't believe your age and don't believe your nationality. So the Home Office in the UK disputed my nationality, and the social services and other services said that I wasn't 13 because I looked old. And that's true. I look old because I had to grow faster to survive. And I grew up in a war zone. Anyhow, I think that could be improved. We need a culture of welcome. We need to treat people not as suspects and criminals. We need to treat them as our fellow human beings. And sadly, there are a lot of hostility in Europe towards refugees, and there's a lot of fear because the politicians in the media has created against people like me, and I'm not a threat to anyone. And most refugees are, fleeing for their safety and they're fleeing violence and persecutions, and they want to have a better future, and they're seeking sanctuary in asylum, which is their human right. So things need to improve, and when people reach their host countries or their destination, they intend to arrive. I felt like in the UK, people are quite generous. People are kind. Majority of the British people are, considerate. But it's the government and part of the media. And perhaps it's the same with India. It's the same with a lot of countries. I mean, there was a big thing in India about this new bill, which was the Muslims were not happy about. And the Indian government said they will accept refugees, but only a religious minority. So, I think when it comes to refugees, no matter what religion, what political affiliations you have, whatever minority or non-minority, if your life is at risk, your life is at risk. And if you're seeking refuge, you should be granted that and treated with dignity and respect. It's not much to ask, And so I was hoping I would not see the situation again, but I think there will be millions of Afghans fleeing for safety. And I think India and a lot of other countries has been saying that they will make the process easy in terms of visas and things. India has started some online visas, but the difficulty is getting out of Afghanistan. Kabul airport is closed. I mean, they're working on it to reopen it. Let's see how that goes. All our borders with neighboring countries have been closed. Pakistan has not been allowing. A lot of Afghans go to Pakistan for medical treatment, and that has not been, allowed. They've not been supportive, sadly. I think only Iran has opened it, had a limited opening of the border, but then it's very difficult to get the Iranian visa to go to Iran and then from there to travel onwards. And all of our Central Asian countries have closed their borders as well. Afghan needs help and Afghan needs support. And I think I ask people to open their hearts to Afghans and to other refugees and invest in their future.
Definitely. And the human rights that, once they are even refugees, I think the human rights that they're given are limited as a refugee. So could you throw some light on the human rights that they're given and the ones that they're not given?
Sure. So when you become refugee, so when I go to the UK, it took me about 5 years to convince the government that I was a genuine refugee. So when you claim asylum, you are called asylum seeker, even though you are a refugee, but then you're not officially a refugee, you're not recognized by the government. So the process took a long time and I was keep being refused asylum. I was keep being told that I will be detained and deported to Afghanistan, even though the funny thing was they did not believe I was from Afghanistan. And then so I had to battle with the age dispute and nationality dispute. I was granted something called discretionary leave to remain. So a very limited visa, limited leave to remain, a temporary visa. And then once I was accepted as a refugee, normally you are granted 5 years leave to remain, and then you can have some certainty. You're not in limbo. You're not have to worry about being detained and deported. So you have a lot of rights when you are granted refugee status. In most of the European countries, you have right to work. You have rights to travel. The travel is quite limited. You can, of course, you can get visas to places, but it's very difficult to get visas and a UN travel document, a UN refugee travel document. In Europe, if you have a European refugee travel document, you could travel to within the EU. But Britain, I used to be able to travel to about 15 EU countries without a visa. But now that has changed because of Brexit. We have left the European Union, unfortunately. You have a lot of rights. The only rights you don't have is that you're not a citizen. You don't have citizenship rights. And then you don't have rights to vote. You don't have right to freedom, like travel freedom in terms of there's a lot of restriction, and you are, as a refugee, you can't travel to your home country. So I have not been back to Afghanistan for the last 14 years, actually 15 years now, almost since I left, and I very much miss my mom and my family. So yes, when you're a refugee, you have rights, but it's not the complete rights. And so in the last 13 years, 14 years I have been in Britain, the things that I could not have been able to do are two things. You have to pay tax, you have to do everything like a normal citizen, but you can't vote and you can't travel freely. I don't mean like internally, but I mean externally. So now I recently become British citizen. Now I'll be able to travel more freely. I can go to 175 or so countries without a visa or visa on arrival. It's much easier being a British citizen. But being an Afghan, you're now basically, you can go to like 25 countries without a visa or visa on arrival. They're all small islands in the middle of nowhere. But as a refugee, you have rights, but it's not equal or same as being a citizen. And I've been campaigning and advocating for more rights. Fortunately, the Scottish government here in the UK and the Welsh government, because Britain is made up of these small nations, has allowed not only refugees, but other people with leave to remain and people with right to stay to vote in their local election as well as in their national parliament and assembly election, but not to the UK parliament. So they have also allowed, they're 16 and 17 years old to vote, which is very progressive, and that's great. Young people, like if you're 16, 17 in the UK, you can get married, you can join the army, you can do all sorts of things, but you can't vote, which doesn't make sense. And I think it's the same in India, perhaps in a lot of places, only over 18 are allowed to vote. And there's a lot of 16 and 17 years old who are very politically engaged, who knows, who know a lot more than a lot of older generation or people who are in their 20s. So there has been some progress, but I hope to see more refugees being able to, more freedom to travel being facilitated, and people being allowed to vote and have a say. Because if you're paying taxes, then not having representation, that's just not fair. That doesn't make sense. And so, I have been working in paying taxes, for example, but I have had no representation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, once you're paying taxes, you should have the rights to, vote for your government, the government that you want, the one that you're paying taxes to. So it makes sense. That should be given. I think there are limited rights for refugees in India as well.
Yeah, even in the UK, if you're an asylum seeker, you're not allowed to work. You have to live on £5 a day. You get about £36 a week. And it's very tough because people want to have dignity, want to have, and there's shortage of laborers here. People could work, and a lot of asylum seekers are very skilled people. They have experiences, they have qualification, most of them. Some of them could work in like unskilled jobs as well, but it's just the government is not allowing them, and they don't want to be burdened on society, and that's a shame. It's the same in India and other places where if they allow people to work, they can earn some money, support themselves and their families, not to be a burden on the states and not have to rely on charities and handouts. So it makes sense to allow people to work and give them permission to work. Perhaps if they're waiting for longer for their decision. There are people in the UK who've been waiting for 10 years to get a decision and are not allowed to work and had to somehow survive on charities and food banks, which is very unfair and inhumane.
It is, and there are kids that are suffering. Their educations are suffering because they're not allowed to school and they're not allowed to education, and they just ran from their homeland. They left everything. It's not like they were not rich back home. They were, and now they're fighting for everything that they can. For
sure.
Food,
and the good thing,
water.
true. The good thing in the UK is they allow children to go to school, but if you go to university and don't have a status, you can't. But until school, you are allowed to. Children are allowed to go to school. But now they're making it a little difficult here, asking people for like papers and documentation. Normally, if you're a school-age child, you are able to go to school. That's a good thing about Britain. A lot of European countries, it usually takes time to get into school, to get into mainstream school and get the help and support. But you're right, in most countries, for example, Afghans in Iran and Pakistan, they find it very, very difficult. There are very few rights when it comes to employment and when it comes to education. A lot of Afghans are not allowed to be in mainstream education. You hear this from Pakistanis, oh, look, we hosted 3 million refugees. Well, they're refugees because of your policies in the first place and for supporting insurgency and supporting proxy. But at the same time, when they are refugees, they have very few rights. And a lot of them are living in extreme poverty. And in Iran, Afghans have underground schools because the state doesn't allow it. In Pakistan, a lot of Afghans had to just get education in the camp, and they're not allowed to go to mainstream education. They're just being looked. There's so much discrimination and racism. Unfortunately, it's just sad to see because most Afghans are in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is the kind of the Afghan province of the Pakistani state. And these are all Pashtuns, but they're just sad to see the racism and discriminations against Afghan refugees.
Yeah, definitely. And that's in a lot of countries that I see. In South Asian countries are also discriminating. And I hope that this gets better. Coming towards your journey part, that your mom sent you to human traffickers. I want to know the amount that she had to pay, to the human traffickers so that you could reach to Europe. And yet you had to go through a lot of, difficulties that you mentioned in your book. So how much did she have to pay?
So my family paid about $8,000 to get us to Europe. And actually, there's a difference between traffickers and smugglers. So I was mostly smuggled. I was handed over to smugglers, not necessarily to traffickers, but there were times where smuggling became trafficking. There were situations where I was forced to go. When you're forced, then you're trafficked. When you have when they have your consensus, when they have permission, it's more of a smuggling. Yeah. So there's a difference between smuggling and trafficking, and traffickers and smugglers. Traffickers are a bit more scary than smugglers, but they're both, it's a criminal network. It's a criminal business. So there's just a differentiation and definition. So most of my journey, I was smuggled and I was in the hands of smugglers and occasionally traffickers, but mostly smugglers. And these were like facilitators, drivers, people who host us in their homes, people who, guides. I used every type of transport that you can imagine, lorries, trains, cars, airplanes, horses, walking, boats, ferries, and every transport that I experienced. And I met lots of smugglers. In the book, I was able to remember about 25 smugglers, that the main ones that I have met and encountered on the way. It was just a mixture of everything, really. So it wasn't just a one mode of transportation. And
and I want to say that the spaces that you were put into to be smuggled to places, like the train, and that you were pushed from a running train, and that's scary.
It was, I was asked to jump around a moving train. It was moving slowly, but still it was moving. It was definitely, I was afraid and scared. And also being in the boat designed for 20 to 30 people, and there were 120 of us for 3 days and 3 nights almost. So there were occasions and times where I was, fit into small spaces. And I got across from Greece to Italy on top of a lorry engine, which is very, very hot and dangerous and risky. So there were risks we were taking to get to safety. It was just, and now when I'm thinking about it, it's like beyond belief. But when you're going through it, you have nothing to lose. You just make the most of every opportunity along the way. You just give it a try, and you just hope You just hope and pray that you will come out on the other end safe and sound.
Exactly. And the part that where you mentioned that it was like a game of snake and ladders that I read in the book, that you reached to Bulgaria and then you were taken to prison and then you were sent back to Turkey. And then they are saying like they'll deport you back to Afghanistan, and you ran. And why did they deport everybody? And it's so uncanny that they're doing all of these things. The person is like trying to get out of here. They are running from Taliban. He's a 12-year-old kid, for God's sake. Like, why not have humanity?
See, this is the thing. This is the frustrating thing was the deportation. That's why it took me over 12 months. And that's why the journey, instead of being 5,000 miles or 3,000 miles, it was 12,000 miles. I did 1,000 miles every month, basically, when I look back on it now. The deportation was very inhumane. It was an act of aggressions, and it was unnecessary. In most cases, perhaps illegal to push back refugees, because you should give people asylum if you're a signature to the UN Convention on Refugees. So Bulgaria was, and they didn't even ask for asylum, and they basically mistreated us really badly and put us in prison. And I was deported to Turkey, and then I was arrested in Turkey and spent two weeks in a prison in Istanbul, and they deported us all the way back to Iran, which was really, really frustrating. And I was very upset and angry because, and then I managed to escape from the Iranian police prison bus. It's just like, there were situations where, I don't know, not only being a 12 years old boy, but they were putting us through. We were running for our lives. We were running for safety. And the least they could do was to allow us to continue on the journey. If they were not providing us safety, just don't bother us. We were just transiting through. But of course, countries like right now, Greece has built a wall with Turkey. So they don't want refugees. About 85-kilometer border they have with them, land border. They build a wall and fences on it. Turkey has built a huge wall with Iran. It has a big border with Iran. Don't want the Afghan refugees to come through. Turkey deported 250,000 Afghans last year. Iran doesn't want the Afghans to come. They've been shooting them, and we saw videos last year. People have been burned alive in the cars, been shot by the Iranian army or police or whatever. It's just so heartbreaking to see that countries like everybody just doesn't want. Like the UK today has made an announcement that they want boats at the English Channel to be turned back to France. Everybody seems to be afraid of refugees. Everyone just wants them not to be their responsibility. Like the UK been saying, you can go anywhere but the UK. Like you should go to France. A lot of people do stay in France, and I think, to be fair to the French, they're not great in welcoming asylum seekers and refugees, but they do take more than the UK. France, Germany, Italy, Sweden, Spain, Greece, a lot of these countries have a lot more refugees than the UK. But the UK, being responsible for the wars in a lot of places and have intervention like places in Afghanistan and Iraq, has been doing very little to take the burden sharing. So yes, I hope there were less deportation. I think detention is completely unacceptable, wrong, particularly for refugees. They just want peaceful and safe lives. And I still don't get it why would Turkey. So for example, Turkey has hosted 3 million or so Syrians, which is great, but they're not recognizing Afghans as refugees. So then countries like Greece been saying, oh, Turkey is a safe country. We will not accept refugees from Turkey coming through. And Turkey is saying, well, if Europe is not accepting refugees, we will not allow them to go through. And so, it's just these policies. Instead of building bridges, they've been building walls to stop these desperate human beings.
And that is really, really sad. And I even heard in the news that there are places where they are not even letting the refugees in. They're not giving them food, water, and it's raining, and they're standing at the borders to get in.
Especially in situation in Croatia, in Bosnia and Hungary, and all these Eastern European countries, in the Balkan countries, like Serbia and North Macedonia. The situation is heartbreaking, and also on the Greek islands, people are put in overcrowded camps and Lesbos and chaos, and some more islands near the Turkish border, like camps are built for 2,000-3,000 people. They put to 11,000-12,000 people in there, and without certainty what's going to happen to their future. They're all in limbo. So the European policies when it comes to asylum seekers are very, very inhumane, immoral, wrong. And I hope more countries do more. I really want India, China, Russia, and other countries in the region to do more and to support. If they're not going to host refugees, at least they should support countries who are hosting refugees.
Definitely.
And so there are, like, for example, 80 million displaced people in the world, and about 30 million refugees. And 85% of the world refugees are hosted in neighboring countries, and about 50 million are internally displaced in their own countries.
Yeah, the situation just got worse, and it just increases. The numbers are increasing. Gulwali, I would like to get back to your childhood, where you said that you were a shepherd back in the days when you were in Afghanistan. So what was life like in Afghanistan before you had to leave, unfortunately?
Sure, life was beautiful. I spent most of my childhood from age 3, 4 till age 7 or so with my grandparents living in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. We used to have sheep and goats and other animals. It was great. I really enjoyed being in the mountains, having freedom, running around with my grandparents. Just spent very little time with my own parents and siblings. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And yeah, life was good. And then until the war started back in 2001, which has changed everything for us. My country, my home became a war zone. And we saw a lot of injustices and oppressions and wrongdoings by the US and foreign forces in the country, in their kind of Afghan backers. So, one of the reasons, of course, I'm sad the government has collapsed, but actually in the last 20 years, there were a lot of injustices. There were a lot of oppression. So there were people in the government, in the Afghan government, who are, warlords, people who take advantage of their position of power and authority and oppressed a lot of people. And there were a lot of corruptions. There were a lot of issues, but of course it was much better than the situation now. But still, there were Afghan people who were fed up of supporting a government, a republic, which did not help them. And a lot of people in Afghanistan once, like my parents and my family used to say, look, we were willing to give our freedom in return for security. And that was one of the reasons they kind of accepted the Taliban rule in the early 2000s, because there was a civil war beforehand. There were warlords in charge of every district and provinces, and they were like just lawlessness. There was no central government. So the Taliban came and put a stop to it, but then they become quite, fundamentalists and extremists in evil. But ultimately, people, even now, there are a lot of people I speak to, families in rural Afghanistan. They just want to survive. They want to provide for their families. They don't care who is governing Kabul, who is in charge of the government, as long as they could be safe, their property could be protected, and they're able to feed their families, they're able to harvest and grow things, they're fine. But of course, the young Afghans, we want accountability, we want freedom, we want opportunities, and we want democracy, which makes sense. But for, sadly, the previous government for the last 20 years were just, there were so much mismanagement and arguments amongst themselves. They couldn't agree on governments. They were challenging each other. There were people in government, ministers, but also in opposition. Democracy is great, but Afghanistan was a very young democracy. And so, yeah, the times of my childhood was good memories, being with my grandparents, and then, experiencing the war and growing up in a war was tough. And sadly, that's why a lot of Afghans were forced to flee. And I have friends in the UK, also in Europe. We came all as kind of kids and children. Now we all grown up. We have our own families. And I just wish we didn't have to go through this experience. And then now seeing, what's happening in Afghanistan with the Taliban takeover and how the world just allowed it to happen. It's just another chapter in our history. And I hope this will not last long. I hope things will improve somehow. I don't know how, but somehow. And I'll be able to go back and see my mom and my siblings, who I'm not seen for the last 15 years. But my childhood was definitely the highlights of my life, being a shepherd.
And being a shepherd was cool. You guided your own sheep, and you lived in the mountains in the tent. And all of this is mentioned in the book, The Lightless Sky, in detail. Do go read it. I also want to ask you that what kept you going, that you mentioned that you haven't seen your mom for 15 years now, and it's really sad. What kept you going to reach Europe? Because it was a tough, very tough journey.
Sure. So basically, what was keeping me going was three things. Not letting my mothers down, because she sent us away and told us, not to come back and, stay focused, and finding my brother. So because I was separated by smugglers from my brother, I was hoping to find him everywhere I went. I looked for him. So not letting my moms down, the determination to find my brother. And I had hopes and faith. I'm a believer, and I thought things was happening for a reason. Perhaps God had a better plan for me, and I will overcome this. As much as frustrating and difficult and hard it was, I will overcome this adversity, and there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, the thing that was keeping me going was faith and hope, and my mother's prayers, perhaps, and finding my brother. And there were times where I wanted to give up, but then I had very little choice of what happens when I give up. What do I do? So there was no really turning back as such. I had to continue. And there were times where I kind of forgot about time. I just didn't want to know what day and week and month it was, because there was no point. Time becomes irrelevant, because there were days and ends we will spend in basements and places where It was very, in inhumane conditions. You just didn't want to count days. You just wanted to, live there.
Yeah, it was tough, and you learned how to escape prisons. And that's a
Hmm.
quality that you gain from there. And I hope things get better and that you get to meet your mom, because that's something, man. 15 years is a lot.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, like I got married here, and I wish my mom would have been here.
Yeah.
I got a little baby Zoha about 10 months ago, and
I saw her. I saw her. She's
yeah,
really
I want
cute.
her. Thank you. I want her to, I want her to grow up with her grandma and the
Yeah.
uncles and the aunties. But there's being a refugee, it's a huge sacrifice, and then you had to explain to people why they shouldn't be mean to you and should welcome you. My
Exactly.
sadly my little sister passed away. I didn't see her. My grandmother, who was
I'm
most beloved to
sorry.
me, yeah, my grandmother, who was very dear to me, she passed away, and I was not there. Like my brother
Oh,
got married, one of my sister got married, and so all these occasions that happens, once in a lifetime, you want to be part of it,
true.
and so I
Yeah.
wasn't. And so that's the sacrifices that most refugees make. And at least I've been fortunate to go to university, get a degree, have a master, travel the world, write a book, and do all sorts of cool things and amazing stuff. But ultimately, if I have a choice, if I want to be anywhere, I want to be with my loved ones. That's what I've been trying to explain to people, that when you become a refugee, it's not something out of a choice, it's out of a necessity, and something that is not in your control.
Obviously, the grandmother that you mentioned, as I see the picture in the book, she is a very strong and loving lady. Like, I see her as somebody, truly a motherly image and a strong woman of Afghanistan. And I
I-
wish that you were in the
Indeed,
picture.
she was. Indeed, she was. Yes, yeah.
So, you mentioned in your books a lot of places that you were, during the transit to Europe, you went to a lot of places, and your little childhood brain and creativity was observing the cultures really crisply, the differences that were happening. Would you like to share some, experiences from those travels, like when you were going to the bazaars and you were shopping in Istanbul, and a 12-year-old kid seeing a vast difference in culture altogether? You're now out on a journey. So would you like to share some experiences from those cultures?
Of course. I mean, I love traveling. I've been to about 20 countries in the last 5 years since I've been able to travel, and with the publication of the book. It's, I love traveling, meeting new people, experiencing new cultures. But when I was in the journey, I didn't really enjoy it. It was not something that I wanted to do. But yes, the culture was very different. Everything was strange to me. I was experiencing a lot of things for the first time, like traveling on the train or being on a boat, and even being on a plane, being in all sorts of things that I was doing was for the first time. And Istanbul was very interesting because it was a very liberal city. It was very open-minded. There was women walking around without hijabs. That was something strange for me to see, even because like in Afghanistan, even in Iran, people were completely, like, women were completely covered. So there was a lot of culture shocks around. I mean, Istanbul was very much like Turkey, like the rest of Europe when I continued on the journey onwards. So yeah, I was definitely experiencing things that I did not expect to experience. So and that has been my life for the last 13 years. I've been learning new things and transforming, trying to keep to my own beliefs and principles which are important to me, but also letting go of some of the views that I held about women, about other people and so, other religions and so on. So it's been a truly an educational experience for me, and I think the journey has made me who I am today. When I was going through it, I didn't really think of it as such, but now later on reflecting on it, and I always try to be kind and compassionate, and because I have seen what it means not to be kind. I saw a lot of humanity and kindness from people on the journey, but also I saw cruelty and inhumanity from men to men as well. And so it made me realize that the importance of little things in life. So whenever, for example, when I see somebody struggling on the train, or somebody needs help in the city, or somebody needs support or advice or whatever, I'm always trying to help, especially if I see somebody who lost. When I'm in London and somebody lost in the tube or something, I always make an effort to help and support them if there's an old person needing help with their baggage, like little things. Because when I was on this journey, there were little things which made a huge difference to me. Somebody giving me a lift, or somebody just like advising me or giving me the directions, giving me food or some money, or just being nice and kind to me, and just like acknowledging that I existed. So yeah, one thing I've been telling people when I do talks, when I travel to schools and universities here in the UK and elsewhere, I say, look, we shouldn't take anything for granted, but also we as human beings have it within us ourselves to be compassionate. We are capable of showing humanity. We can impact people's lives. It depends how we do it. It depends, whether we want to touch them in a positive way or in a negative way. So we all have these, our actions and inactions have consequences. been to some really like cool parts of the world. I went to like small country Malta a few times. I went to lots of cool places in Europe and elsewhere. I went to Azerbaijan once for a conference. That's the furthest or the closest I've been to Afghanistan. And when I was coming to the UK on the journey, first started watching Indian movies. We used to rent films in Istanbul.
I read that in your book. I read that.
Yeah, so that's where the kind of the movie thing started. And then in the UK, we used to have like in the evenings, we used to have times on our hands at home after school or college. So my friend, he had a huge, these cassettes, these big
VCRs.
type cassettes. VCRs.
VCRs.
And literally we had like hundreds of films, and so he would watch like old, really interesting movies. We watch like really old movies. So yeah, there you go. That's how I kind of learn Hindi. And मैं हिंदी बोल सकता हूँ अगर लोग बात करें मुझे समझ भी आता है. But I studied Urdu here in school in the UK. So my kind of Urdu is mixed with Hindi and Urdu. But anyhow,
kind of the same. It's kind of the same.
I understand them. I get it. When people speak to me, I completely get it. And I love trying different food, especially if it's halal. If you gotta have an open mind to cultures and differences. I think differences is not a bad thing. So yeah, I've learned a great deal about humans, and I think humans inherently are not bad. Humans are not evil. People have their fear or their ideas of otherness and stuff, but once you meet people, they warm up to you. The human interaction, the human connections. I mean, look, you're in India and I'm in the UK. I'm Afghan, and look, we're having. There are things we have in common. There are things we disagree on, but still we could be friends, and we're having this conversation and this dialogue. That's important. And not having conversation, not having dialogue is dangerous. I think, if politicians in countries and people disagreeing with each other could talk to each other and overcome their differences and trying to find a common ground and compromise. So yeah, and through university, through school and my experiences of traveling, I have learned a lot, and I've definitely let go of a lot of my, egos and my prejudices and unconscious bias. I mean, we still have these, like, we're humans, but I try to treat people with respect and dignity that, I want to be treated with. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the last time I knew that you, English was your fifth language, traveling so much. So now how many languages do you speak?
Still, I'm losing. I'm forgetting most of the languages. So it's like, I'm trying to focus on English and learn English. So Pashto, Dari, Farsi, Urdu. I mean, Hindi, I could speak and some English. But I really want to learn Arabic, and I have become a lot lazier in recent years. I used to be very healthy and fit and active. I think when you have a comfortable life compared to other. Like when I was growing up, you see from the book, we used to work in fields, we used to work in shops. We had a very productive and busy life, and also on the journey and early on, because I was so determined to get my schools done, to go to college and then do my university and do my studies. And now like I'm, done, but then I have become a lot soft. I complain about little things. I complain about the weather. I complain about traffics, and, I complain about things that just stay. But again, that's what human beings we are. I sometimes I don't always think about like my journey or my experiences of the people in Afghanistan. People have a lot more problems to deal with than a traffic jam or the bad weather. So yeah, certainly I should be learning more languages, supporting refugees, helping people. I get a lot of media inquiries. So I have been very, very busy, to be honest, and also busy with our family. We have a little girl and she keeps us entertained. She keeps us busy. But I think I'm making excuses now, but I should have learned Arabic, and I should have, I was keen on German when I was in school, because like my book is published in 7 countries in 6 languages, including Germany and France. And I would love to learn Arabic and maybe German or French. French will be a little difficult. I think German is something that I could give it a try. At school, I was good at it, but then I needed to learn English first. So yeah.
I also started learning Arabic, and I could differentiate. Like, it's like when you can speak Urdu and Hindi are similar, and like Farsi, I told you some words are similar. But then you cannot read and write Urdu. So it's funny that we both can speak like all these languages, but we cannot read and write. So I was trying to learn those letters. So I learned alif and ba and ta and noon.
And once you get the alphabet, and then hopefully then you can join them together. So that, Pashto, Dari, Farsi, and Urdu, because I can read them all, because they're all from Arabic, and I read the Quran, and I can kind of understand, writing or reading it. I do speak with my friends and family in Pashto, and I think it's good to learn languages. Whenever I meet my Indian friends, I speak to them with Hindi, and I speak to my Pakistani friends in Urdu. I speak to my Iranian friends in Farsi. And I think it's wonderful. It's quite like, it makes you feel really intelligent. It makes you feel more intelligent than you are. But I think, no, learning language is great, because if you can talk to people in their own languages, when people talk to me in Pashto, in Dari, that really impresses me. If somebody who is non-Afghan and speaks to me in Dari or Pashto, and even if they've done something really wrong, I'll forgive them, because that the connection that you have with people, if they speak your own language, it's different. It's like, it's special.
So next time, think to be noted that learn Pashtun and then talk to Gulwali. So
Exactly,
that he
yes.
will forgive you or give you a treat. For that matter. Also, you had a plan for running for a president of Afghanistan in 2035, and I hope you do, so that I can travel in Afghanistan.
I would love for people to come and see Afghanistan. One of my dreams is to travel across Afghanistan. We have 400 districts in 34 provinces. I want to visit. I want to spend time with people. That's kind of one of my daily dream. I want to spend a year traveling across the country. And about presidency, I used to be, again, when I was young, you have like, your blood is warm and you want to do things. And now I'm like, I'm coming to a realization, maybe it's not something that I could do. I was very keen on becoming parliamentarian in Afghanistan, becoming an ambassador for Afghanistan. I hope so. That still happens, using my education and experiences of representing my people in the country. But maybe not anytime soon. I hope before I'm too old, I have the chance to serve my people. I continue to serve Afghanistan and Afghans in the interest. So whenever I travel, whenever I do talks, I'm reimagining or rebranding Afghanistan and Afghans, and I'm trying to share the suffering as well as the beauty. And through the book, half of the Lightless Sky is about Afghanistan and my childhood there, because I wanted to give people an understanding of what Afghanistan is look like, what Afghans goes through, and our lives and our experiences and our families. So I hope to play a positive role in rebuilding Afghanistan. That continues to be my aims and objective. Doesn't matter the position or the authority that I have. I will continue to do what I can as a writer, as a campaigner, as an activist and advocate for human rights and refugees' rights and social justice and whatnot. Afghanistan will always be an important part of my life, and no matter where I get to, I will not forget my roots, and I will want to help my people in any way that I can. The least I could do is give them a voice. And the last 2-3 weeks, I've done like 35 interviews with mainstream medias here, and it's been exhausting. It's been mentally and emotionally difficult. But I think that's the least I could do, to speak out and share their pain and their suffering with the world, and hope to find durable, sustainable solutions to the humanitarian situation in the country.
Definitely. And the more that you throw light, and I think every day that we learn a lot about Afghanistan through you and through your channels, social media channels. And also I've learned a lot through your book. Like, I did not know that there was sand in your carpets, and then you have to brush it up every day, because there's a lot of sand in the house. So yeah, that's something new I learned about, living in Jalalabad or Herat. And then it's like, and my mom got to know that it's cold in Afghanistan, and she's like, no, it's a Registan. And I'm like, no, it's cold.
No, Afghanistan is a very cold, very mountainous, but so Afghanistan, it's different parts, but like Jalalabad is usually warmer because we're close to Peshawar, but Kabul in northern Afghanistan is very cold, but in south and west is more of a desert. So yeah, it's a very interesting climate. It's cold in winter, it's warm in summer, but it's like it could be
it's a mix
in the middle. Yeah, it's a mix. It's definitely like mountainous. There's a lot of it's not really Registan as such, but there are places like in western Afghanistan, southwest Afghanistan, like Nimroz, for example. It's called Nimroz. It means half a day, because there are a lot of sandstorms and there's a lot of deserts. But most of Afghanistan is agricultural land, and there are a lot of rivers. So yeah, Afghanistan is, it's a small country, but it has a different climate and different seasons,
also
like proper seasons.
Yeah, and also Panjshir is almost like Kashmir, I think.
Yeah, Panjshir is definitely very beautiful. It's in the Hindu Kush. So Hindu Kush mountains, literally, it's really beautiful valleys, and there's a lot of other beautiful places as well, as well as Panjshir. But Panjshir is well known because of political reasons. There are other less known places which are as beautiful.
Which one would you suggest? If we ever get to travel to Afghanistan,
I would love people. I know. Main cities like in the north, the main city is Mazar-e-Sharif. It's very culturally important. It's religiously important. It has beautiful architecture. But also, like, Herat is the culture capital of Afghanistan, and Kandahar is very historical, politically and religiously, and and so Jalalabad. Every city has its own speciality. But I feel like if people want to travel, they should definitely go to the different regions. We don't have regions, but like hubs, different provinces. And central Afghanistan is definitely Bamiyan, which is very, very historical and cultural. Like Ghazni, the Ghaznavid Empire started from Ghazni, and it was the Islamic culture capital a few years ago. It has huge significance. There are other places where, like Ghor is a province which the Ghurid Empire started from. After the Ghaznavid was defeated by the Ghurid in the 11th century, in the 10th century. They governed all the way to India, to New Delhi. I mean, all the way to Bengal. And so, before we were talking about India, Afghanistan, so the Ghaznavi Empire and the Ghurid Empire, and then we have Ahmad Shah Durrani and Abdali's empire, Durrani's empire. So yes, there's been there are a lot of places that I think people, when people visit, hopefully, should not just go to the main cities, but should go to all these little places, less known places. We have beautiful fruits, and we have Afghanistan is full of fruit different tastes, and the food we have is like unmatched. And because it's a mixture of Central Asia, there's influence of Indian influence, there's like the Persian influence, but Afghan cuisine is very, very unique. So yeah, I encourage people to try it in Delhi and elsewhere where there are Afghans food, and to check it out, because I've been seeing some blogs from Indians. They've been going to the little Kabul and trying the Afghan food. Check it out.
Yeah, there's a mini Kabul in Lajpat, and I used to go to Lajpat a lot. I still do. So it's a very good shopping center, and I find a lot of Afghanistanis there, and they're all these Afghans are with their families, and it's so cool to see that the attire that they wear, the Pashtun wali attire, the hats and that kurta, and so it's amazing to see all of that. All right, so coming towards the end of the interview, any last message that you would like to give to our listeners and viewers?
I just want people to make the most of every opportunity they have, and just realize that when people go through these experiences, it could be anyone could become a refugee. And I think please learn more, educate yourself, be aware, be concerned citizen, care about what's happening in the world. Like, for example, right now what's happening in China with the Uyghur Muslims and the Rohingyas in Burma, the injustices elsewhere in the world. And also we discussed Kashmir earlier before the interview. Like, when there are injustice happening, you should make a stand. Even the Quran says that if your father is unjust, you should call it out. And I think we need to be fair, we need to be just. So of course, people love their army, their government, or whatever, they're nationalists or whatnot. We should always be in a position to be able to call out when we see oppression, when we see injustices, because ultimately, like as a Muslim, we believe your question on the day of judgment about your actions or inactions, and the good or the bad that you have done, we will all be questioned. But I think perhaps we will be questioned about the rights of other people as well. And so we should give people their rights and treat them with dignity and respect, and just be curious, learn, be open-minded, and learn about different cultures, try different food, and live a fulfilling life, live a life to the full potential. I encourage people, I invite people to learn more and to research about Afghanistan, about other countries, other situations, and to understand. We live in a very globalized world. Whatever happens in Afghanistan impacts us elsewhere. For example, with the virus, started in China, it has impacted the whole world. And when we see things happening in the world, we should not close our eyes to injustices and wrongdoings. We should always be able to call it out and make our voices heard, especially if you're living in a democracy. Go out and protest, demonstrate. Don't take your freedom, don't take your democracy for granted. Hold your loved ones close to you, especially we saw with the COVID-19, a lot of people lost their lives in India as well as elsewhere. So yeah, we definitely have a responsibility and duty to support our old parents. I mean, we will never be able to repay them back for what they have done for us, but we definitely need to show kindness to them. And please be kind to your parents, because they have raised you, they brought you, they've given you an upbringing, and the least you could do is to show them kindness and support them in their days of need.
Definitely. And that's a very beautiful message there, Gulwali. And thank you for this message. And thank you for being on Inspiring Explorers and honoring me with being on this show. And thank you for being with
us. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the work that you do. Wishing you success and good luck. And I hope our path crosses one day when I visit India or you come to the UK. And yes, stay safe and continue doing what you're doing.
Definitely. And prayers for Afghanistan from our side.
Yes, Korea, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. So this was Gulwali Passarlay's inspiring life journey so far, and I hope this episode helped you understand about the Afghanistan and refugee crisis. Thank you so much for giving your precious time to this podcast. If this episode was inspiring and insightful, please do drop a comment on my Instagram and YouTube channel, MyBohoVoyage. All links are available in the description box below. Do check out the video versions of the episodes on my YouTube channel, MyBohoVoyage, MyBohoVoyage. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. All links provided in the description box below. Also, I hope you come connect with me on Instagram and drop me a hi or write a comment so that I know we are in this journey together. This is Meenakshi Srivastava, your host for Inspiring Explorers, saying goodbye and wishing peace for Afghanistan and the world. See you next week with an amazing, inspiring interview. Till then, take care. Goodbye.